Swati, hi. Can you hear me, Swati? Am I audio? Okay, Tanmoy, there you are. Is this better or is this still patchy?
Um, it still seems to be breaking up a little
Your
bit, but I can hear you when you speak.
Yeah, it's the same with you. So I don't know. Let's go ahead with it. Doesn't matter. I think, hi, whoever is listening in, if you guys want to just give us a quick feedback, Swati, if you're still there, hey, tell me, can you hear both of us clearly, or is one of us patchy? Can hear you. Can you hear my guest? I'm good, thank you. It's gone bad again. Who's gone bad again? So I just want to know whether it's Tanmo, whether it's me, and you guys are having a problem listening or watching either of us. Yes, means both. I don't know. I am a blur. Oh my God, it's me. Who would have thought? I have the most fantastic network going. I I actually don't know what to say. Um, what do I do? I'm in the UAE, so I usually have the best, but you can hear me, right? So and the guest is more important than me, so I'm going to go with this and stick with the fact that we have a brilliant guest today, and you guys have seen me enough times. So we will, as long as the guest is visible and audible, I will carry on with this conversation. And Tanmoy Goswami, I'll have to introduce you once again because we've started afresh on this one. He's the founding editor of Sanity by Tanmoy, looking to spearhead mental health journalism, and he's going to speak to us about what he discovers. Of course, that's peppered with a lot of personal experience, but on Hope Floats, the attempt is to go beyond the superficial, Tanmoy, beyond the tokenism, that involves, or the depressed of everyone is depressed, that kind of a sense, to go beyond it. So thanks so much for taking the time out today, Tanmoy.
Thank you. Thank you for
And
having me. I was looking at your earlier guests and so many important people, so I'm very honored, decided to um, open up space for me.
no, not at all, not at all. I think the importance for me is in terms of the issues that I continue to pick up on Table Talk, or, the kind of stories that inspire people to come up and share their own experiences. So that's very important to me. And so I want to begin by asking you, I'd asked you if you can tell us a little bit about your organization, about your project.
Yeah, thank you. So anytime somebody asks me to talk about my company or my organization, I have to correct them by saying that it's all me. It's just a solo outfit. I
Me too.
started this. I started this project in December 2020. Um, Suddenly, in the middle of the pandemic, the company that I was working for shut down. And I was working there as the world's first Sanity correspondent. This was an Amsterdam-based media startup called The Correspondent. And when it shut down, I panicked and I thought, how am I going to keep in touch with this wonderful group of subscribers and readers that had coalesced around my work at The Correspondent in the 18 months that I was there? And so without really thinking too much about it, I started Substack newsletter. And that newsletter went on to become one of the top six paid health related newsletters in Substack, on Substack globally. And it was the only non-Western title on Substack's leaderboard. And so I had a feeling that we were on to something. And then in March, I think, of last year, I was admitted into the Newmark School of Journalism at the City University of New York. They have this course for entrepreneurial journalists. So I finished that program, and that was really sort of eye-opening. And I decided to move away from Substack and start sanitybytanmoy.com as an independent platform, as an independent website. And I've been running this as its first independent, 100% reader-funded, ad-free mental health journalism platform. So it's been about 15 odd months, and we have close to 3,000 subscribers, many of whom are paying supporters. My paying supporters are in 40 plus countries in all 6 continents. So I'm very grateful and really surprised at the fact that, yeah, I'm still here 15 months later and still doing this.
So I have to tell you that we have two things in common right here. One is the fact that I started this show also during the pandemic last year. So just a few months possibly after you. And secondly, yes, it's all me. So every time somebody says talk about the show, I'm like, oh my God, that's my little startup. It's me. I pretend it's a we, but it's actually a me. So yes,
I get
right?
it.
So you
Yeah.
get it, right? So fantastic, superb, Tanmoy, that you've been able to pick up an issue that is a very hard issue to penetrate when it comes to our own country, when it comes to our own society.
Um, yeah, it is. And congratulations to you as well, fellow pandemic era entrepreneur, creator. Um, yeah, it is a hard topic. I think there has there has been some sort of palpable change um, in the past, I would say 18 to 24 months. But I'm always wary of overstating that change because when you occupy the sort of bubble of privilege that I inhabit, it might appear as if mental health conversations are becoming more commonplace, or that sort of stigma is fading away little by little. But the reality for the vast majority of people out there is anything but that, right? There is still a lot of stigma, and of course, the work that I do has many limitations. Uh, I'm one person. I always introduce myself as a cis-het, middle-class, upper caste man. So the only thing I'm not is white. Otherwise, the boxes of privilege. So I'm very mindful of that the conversations I am able to foster on my platform are very limited. And of course, I write in English. That is its own limitation. But I do believe that there is, after 15 months of doing this solo, I think there are more things that I take heart from than things that dishearten me. And I think I will take that at this point.
So how tough is it? You've spoken about, your funding. How tough is it to wait for funding like this?
Yeah, it is very tough. I have always been a big believer in reader-funded media because I worked in a vast number of newsrooms in India and internationally, and I have I'm a firm believer that ad-supported newsrooms versus reader-funded newsrooms, the latter will always be more authentic and truer to their purpose, their sort of true north, than ad-funded newsrooms. So having built and sort of closely observed two very different reader-funded newsrooms, one in India and the other one, the correspondent, which was headquartered in Amsterdam, um, I became more of a believer in this model. But there are a few things that you have to be prepared for when you grow, when you want to build something based on subscriptions or memberships or reader funding. Growth will be very, very slow. And that's the reason I don't want to create like a sprawling empire. I have no ambitions of creating the next sort of News Corp. I want to keep this small, manageable, have very low and realistic ambitions. At the moment, my ambition is that I should be able to surface at least three voices, three writers, and three artists from marginalized communities. If I'm able to do that every quarter and pay them fairly, pay them well, I'd consider that done a decent job. And there are many challenges. Like I said, scaling is a challenge. I have to therefore be very conscious of what I end up committing to people, because the novelty around the work is such that a lot of people, a lot of great writers and artists and people with fantastic lived experiences, they want to come and be part of the platform. But I have a strict policy of not using anybody's labor without paying them. Um, Even if a lot of people want to voluntarily contribute, but I always tell them that, hey, please wait till I'm able to pay you at least an honorarium. So growth is very slow, but there are many advantages also of doing it this way, because readers are really your stakeholders. Then they are. I always say that my supporters are my board of directors. So whenever I take any financial decision, I always convene a meeting. I have these quarterly roundtables with my paying subscribers, and I tell them, hey, these are the challenges I'm facing. This is what I'm thinking of doing. Is it okay if I do that? And they're always very supportive, and they're just very wise. And the incredible sort of diversity that they represent from around the world, they always help me with a way out. So I'm not going to get rich doing this work, and that's all right. It's keeping me engaged. It's giving me this feeling of doing something that makes it worthwhile to get up in the morning every day and do this work. As long as that feeling lasts, and I have savings that I can fall back upon, I think I'll continue doing this.
Gosh, I don't want to say we have more things in common than we realized, but we will carry on this conversation outside someday. Your journey, of course, I think it's tremendous, though. You're doing what you believe in, and I think the more we
Thank you.
realize that, I think there's no harm in going, the baby steps way. And as long as you firmly believe in something, because it's very hard to, in an environment like today, to really stick to what you believe in and continue doing that. It's a tough one, right? And mental health, like I was speaking about, you said there are certain changes, and I've noticed a bit of those changes as well. But how difficult was it? This journey of yours is obviously peppered with your own experiences. How difficult was that to share?
I think, to be very honest with you, it was not very difficult at all. And I mean, that is also a reflection of my privilege, I think. Um, my um, my journey as a person who shares openly their mental health stories started in 2016 or 2017, I think. So a long, long time ago, much before mental health became sort of cool in the media, etc. And I had quit my job. I was at that time working a very good job, and I had to quit the job. I was writing a book. I had to return my advance to my publisher, and I had to withdraw into my room. I was severely depressed, um, and it was life threatening. I was confined to my room for over a year. I should have given a trigger warning, actually. So to anybody listening, if anything I say triggers you, please sort of stop watching if you feel like. And I think one of the first things I did when I took that break from work was I went to LinkedIn and I wrote an article on LinkedIn about um, what it feels like to have to stop working because of mental health issues. And I sort of wrote that article and I went to sleep. And the next morning when I woke up, I was like, the LinkedIn app on my phone was, flooded with notifications. And I realized that the LinkedIn India editors had posted it on the India homepage, and it had kind of gone viral. And I was getting mails and messages from people in the US, in Australia, in Singapore, and sort of New Zealand, all sorts of places. And I was amazed. I thought, really, one little story by one little guy in India resonates so much with people. Is there really so much? And a lot of those stories were about how lonely people were and how they were struggling to talk about things, and their families did not understand. Their employers, of course, did not understand, and there was just this fear and stigma and all of it. And honestly, I think I was sort of living under a rock, because clearly I wasn't expecting um, this conversation to be so difficult for so many people. Um, Fortunately, because I opened up very early and then I started maintaining a diary on Twitter. At that time, I had a very small following. So I just started tweeting out my daily experiences of living through depression, anxiety, and other problems. And I received nothing but solidarity and care and concern, and just incredibly generous people on social media, strangers that I've never met till date. Some of them have become close friends. Um, in my sort of personal life, on the other hand, it was a challenge to sort of communicate about this with my parents, with my friends. So it was a bit of a paradox. I could very easily navigate the public sphere, the public domain. And I think as a journalist and somebody who had done a lot of public speaking. Maybe those skills kind of also helped me uh, um strike the right notes. But in my sort of personal life, um, it was harder. And I remember a breakthrough came when, so I always used to tell my parents in the early days when I started taking medication. Um, I would tell them that, I was just taking medicine for some vitamin deficiency, or, some other relatively harmless problem. And then after months of struggling and slowly sort of exposing them bit by bit, finally one day my parents were actually visiting us in Delhi. And I sent my father to the chemist shop in the evening with my psychiatrist's prescription. And I said, hey, can you go and pick this up? And he just looked at it quietly and he didn't say anything. He just went and got the pills for me. And I notched that up as a win. So yeah, it's not been very difficult in the professional / public space. But personally, yeah, it was hard, much harder than it is today.
And in that experience, how have you been able to incorporate that into your professional space?
Yeah, it's actually all about that. It's so even on Sanity, my mission really is to bring together lived experience storytelling with good old-fashioned journalism based on original research and analysis of the different intersections of mental health's intersection with politics, with economics, technology, and pop culture. So whenever I enter a story, whenever I think of a story or approach a story, for instance, I recently wrote about this frightening dependency that I had developed on my anxiety medication. And the starting point for that story was just that. Well, I just wanted to write about the fact that, I had developed this really, really alarming levels of dependency on this drug that I was taking. And then as I went deeper and deeper into the story, I realized that this was a very big problem that very few people were talking about in India. That globally, this is a huge menace. Many hundreds of people have died because of anxiety medication abuse, etc. And I was able to dig out a lot of data, a lot of facts and figures that are barely reported in the mainstream media. So that's the philosophy that I follow for most of my stories. I enter the stories through a personal lens, and then it helps me explore it with a more universal sort of from a more universal angle. So very important. I think the more than anything else, I think being a person who has experienced this has made me a lot more mindful of what not to do, how not to write, how to do trauma-informed interviews, for instance, how to speak to survivors, how not to stress people out when you are talking to them about delicate life stories. So those skills I have developed primarily because I have been on the other side and I've experienced the sort of debilitating impact of mental health conditions. And when people talk about these things very callously, what that can do to you. So yeah, it's really helped me both as a person and as a writer, I think.
And what's the gap that you see between what you feel and what is interpreted outside in Indian families, which is, also Indian society?
Um, Gosh, like there are so many areas where there is a disconnect really between what people perceive, what is projected through popular culture and the media, um, and this sort of
Yeah.
conspiracy of silence that exists in our society, in our families around these conditions. Um, a few things that used to really annoy me, make me feel very helpless in the early days of my advocacy work was, first of all, the constant equivalence that people would make between physical health and mental health. And it was a very, these are well-meaning comparisons. So for instance, and generally they used to, bust stigma. So people would say, depression is just like diabetes, or depression is just like a broken hand, or whatever. And it used to annoy me because I could intuitively feel that it is nothing like any other physical health issue. the experience of it. I didn't have the language to express why exactly it was upsetting me so much. And then as I realized, as I delved deeper, and I trained myself in this sort of intersectional view of mental health. Um, I realized that, I mean, I now have a formulation. I tell people that mental health is a ping pong match between your biology and your environment. Um, I think still the vast majority of people out there don't get it. That how your caste, your gender, your sexuality, your economic status, all of those things, how they play into your mental health. People don't get it, and that can be very, very uh, uh, you know that can be very, very annoying, frustrating. More so for people who don't enjoy the privileges that I do. The other thing, for instance, something um, as delicate and as urgent as suicide, for instance, there is still our understanding as a culture of suicides is very, very inadequate. We don't even know, for instance, the vast majority of people don't know that suicide is the largest killer of young people in India. More than any other, nothing kills as many young people in the 15 to 39 age group as suicide does. People still think suicide is by and large a mental health problem, so they don't look at its socioeconomic antecedents. So there is a vast gap, and what happens because of those gaps is that because people have a flawed understanding of these problems, all the interventions that we as a society want to um, implement, they're all implemented in the wrong place, or not enough of it goes in the right places. So when there are students in distress, for instance, rather than reforming the education system or the examination systems, we will just start a few more helplines as if that is going to help them feel. So our solutions are very topical. They're not nearly as broad-based and as incisive as they should. And that happens because of that gap between reality and perception.
I'm glad you brought up the issue of, children, because I've written a bit about that in the book I wrote. There is a chapter that I focused on their mental health, and Tanmoy, a lot of them have been writing to me even during COVID, for the simple reason that they don't have anybody to speak with. Even though COVID, we were all stuck at home together, but I think more and more people realize that the conversations were getting tougher and tougher at home. And also for the fact that a lot of them, and when I mean kids, I also mean those in their 20s. The fact that they find it completely hampering because the exposure is a little bit different now. At least the people of privilege, as you say, people like us, the exposure is different. They know that their friends abroad, if they need a counselor, they will have access to counseling. If they need medication, they will have access to medication. But they also realize that it's a very tough, tricky road here. How do you bring them at par with really what they want?
You mean, sorry, could you sort of explain that
You know,
question a little bit?
yeah, in the fact that the kids today, they're more aware. They are more aware than
Yeah.
we were ever aware of mental health issues. They understand anxiety. They understand, panic attacks. They understand all of this. They also understand sometimes that they do need help. I think it's not just that intangible something that was dismissed in our times, but they struggle with the fact that they don't have access because they are still they're surrounded by families who are not as open to these issues. And I think the crux of the
Hmm.
matter then eventually lands up to how do you balance it out for them with their families? How do you expose the families to something that they are not ready to be exposed to?
Hmm. Yeah, I wish I had an answer for that. I mean, I am raising a young human, and I worry all the time about these issues. Um, I think when I read up or when I talk to people who specialize in child psychology or people who work with a lot of children, the 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 one common thing that everybody says is that as parents, you've just got to be super sort of watchful, and you've got to create that first layer of safe space around the child. Um, the In most cases, I think again, as a society, as a culture, we end up outsourcing a lot of these responsibilities to quote unquote professionals. And while they have their place, I think as parents, we are responsible for creating first sort of layer of safe space. You are absolutely right that children today are a lot more informed, aware about a lot of things that we probably weren't when we were that age. So, it can be really scary as an older person to familiarize yourself with their vocabulary, with the lives that they live. Um, I don't have a clear answer to this, except that I think, and I sometimes worry about it from a different perspective. I think, because I write so much about my own story, everything about my life is out there in the open, and some of it is fairly, it's it can be graphic, it can be very triggering, and I wonder, gosh, when my child grows up and looks at all of this, what are they going to think about it, or what are their friends going to come and tell them, about their father? And I was discussing this with my therapist, and she actually said, well, um, hopefully they see this as an encouragement for them to just speak up, um, and they realize that they can do that with you without worrying about the consequences, that they feel comfortable talking about everything with you. um, I think our generation has this responsibility, because our parents' generation, they were far too busy with sort of they were on a different level in the Maslowian hierarchy of needs. I know my parents struggled with potential issues, um, and I think our generation has the responsibility to normalize this conversation, and it begins with our homes, with our own kids. Yeah.
I can carry on with this conversation, but I've just realized we're almost to the halfway mark. So I have to let you go. But before that, I want to ask you that, from your own experiences, what is it that you can say to others, who are sometimes not ready to come out with their issues, sometimes don't know where to go, sometimes don't know how to deal with their issues, or even to speak with somebody. What is it that you would tell these people about, I know you keep saying that depression it's a lifestyle issue, and, the kind of understanding that perhaps they need as well to internalize what they're going through.
Hey, I just caught like the first part of your question, because after that your video
Oh gosh,
broke
it's that
again.
bad.
I'm so sorry.
Oh gosh, it's that bad today. Oh gosh, I may have to do this with you another day. But no, I was just saying that, I'll keep this very brief. Uh, how would your experience, how would you lead other people, and what is it that you what is the first point of call, in a sense, that you would tell other people who are also suffering?
Um, I would actually say that, um, i- in my experience, I think, the most difficult thing is to um, actually verbalize this to yourself, that you need help, that you might be experiencing something that is disrupting your life, in ways that are completely bewildering. Once you verbalize it to yourself, and you don't have to necessarily find the sort of pathological language that we often use in mental health, right? Um, I wish that when I was younger and I was struggling, my own journey through mental health challenges started when I was 17 or 18 years old, possibly even younger. I probably didn't even know. I didn't have the awareness back then. And I wish somebody had come and told me that, you don't have to wait for something to become an illness or a disease, and then sort of speak up. If you are feeling um, too stressed, then if you're feeling too distressed, that's good enough. You have the permission. You have your own permission to talk about it. Um, that to me was the most difficult step. Once I gave myself the permission to talk, the rest of the pieces kind of fell in place. I also, over a period of time, I allowed myself to understand that I can't control the way other people are going to react to this disclosure. And again, I say this from a position of enormous privilege. It's very difficult for most people to talk. Um, my message, I think, the real message that I'd like to share is actually for other people, people who are around vulnerable individuals, people who are around individuals who are struggling. Um, I think when I was very young, one of the people who really helped me through a particularly scary crisis, this one friend of mine, would just sit there and just listen to me for hours, like not offer any advice, not offer any solutions, not offer to take me somewhere to fix me. Um, they would just come sit with me, and I would just rant and cry and break down, and eventually sort of laugh. Um, and I could just be myself. And I think that's just so rare and precious. So I feel like if you know somebody, especially a young person who you think is going through something and needs help, just don't rush to give them advice. Don't rush to try and repair them, fix them. Just let them talk and just listen. And even if they don't want to talk, that's fine. Just be there for them in the way that they want you to be there. And hopefully the conversations will flow from there. It takes a little bit of time for people who are struggling to build trust, even if you are a close friend, even if you're a family member. So just allow for that time. Just be there and listen, I think.
I'm so glad you brought that up. It's like surrogate caregivers in a sense as well, right? A very important. I mean, and their role is really important. And uh, I think I'm going to have to end this today. Tanmoy, I can keep going because I'm really skeptical about the audio and the video. And I have a feeling that will have to get you back on this again after I fix my internet because it's clearly me and not you.
Sure.
But
Just give me a shout.
I've been able to hear you completely clearly. I know you haven't been able to, listen to half of my questions, but eternally grateful that you could make the time out today. And
Thank you, Jyotsna. Thank you.
more
And yeah,
power.
thank you so much. And
And
to
more
you.
power to
And
you
to you.
for what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I hope you go places and creating more awareness. It's much needed. But going to wrap this up, unfortunately, today, right here. Thank you, Tanmoy.